Welcome to Heat Checks and Hail Marys. This is Mike Kegley. Heat Check and Hail Mary number one. 5 big things to watch for Big Ten football in 2024. Of course, the biggest story, I know it's tough for a lot of people, but the 4 newbies to the Big Ten, Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA, how bumpy is their ride going to be in the Big Ten, and how hard will the transition be for these 4 schools? Now, the real interesting thing is I wanted to look at Penn State and Nebraska for a template for how these things could look. Ironically, the first meeting of Penn State having a discussion about joining the Big Ten was actually in the spring of 1989, where Joe Paterno and a few others representing Penn State flew to Champaign, and they met with the president of the University of Illinois, Stanley Eikenberry, to discuss the possibility of joining. And of course, in 1993, that became reality. Now, since 1993, Penn State has won 4 Big Ten titles: 1995, 05, 08, and 2016. They haven't won any national titles, though, in football, and they had won 2 in 82 and 86 prior to joining the Big Ten. Additionally, Penn State has not made the CFP since that started in the 2014 and 2015 season. So it's been a good road for Penn State, but it hasn't been quite as good as Penn State boosters probably would have expected it when they joined the Big Ten, and probably thought they were going to be on relatively even footing with Ohio State and Michigan. That's not easy to accomplish. Of course, Nebraska entered in 2011. It's been a lot tougher for them. That program in football won 5 national titles from 1970 to 1997. Since entering the Big Ten, they've only won 1 division title. That was in 2012. And they fired Bo Pelini, the coach who did that, in November of 2014. And they've only had 1 9-game winning season since then. That's definitely not what Nebraska was looking for when they jumped into the league. So you can see that this going into the Big Ten is not something that is oh, this is easy, we're going to do fantastic. When you look at the 4 schools, though, Oregon is on a major roll under Dan Lanning. They may be the one team that can actually beat Ohio State, at least this year. And Ohio State's so loaded that former national champion coaches Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer had comments similar as to, this team has more talent than any team I've seen at Ohio State. So that's probably a huge thank you from Coach Ryan Day, saying, hey, guys, I appreciate that. If we could ratchet up the expectations even higher, that'd be great, especially when he's coming off his 3rd loss to Michigan in a row. UCLA had former head coach Chip Kelly take a job as the Ohio State Buckeyes offensive coordinator. Now, that meant they hired Deshaun Foster, who doesn't have any experience as a head coach, but he has won his players over. In talking with Matt Stevens, the voice of UCLA, he was very positive on the effects Coach Foster has had on the team. Now, that is also balanced against a lackluster media performance at the Big Ten media days. Now we are all aware, those people who did not know that UCLA was in Los Angeles, we now know that, thanks to Coach Foster. He had a rough day there. Bottom line, though, it doesn't really matter what happens at a media days, but he'll be hearing about that all the time. And it could either be a really funny joke if UCLA is very successful, or it could be a precursor to doom if things don't work out for Coach Foster and the Bruins. USC has Lincoln Riley. He came from Oklahoma, brought Caleb Williams with him. But the team has disappointed despite having the number 1 pick in the 2024 NFL draft in Caleb Williams. And people are looking for Coach Riley to have a team that actually plays defense. If you get into the Big Ten and you can't stop other teams a couple times a game, that's going to be problematic. And if you can't stop teams, period, it's going to be tough. So it will be interesting to see what happens between their defensive challenges and what happens when they get into the Big Ten, because that could be very detrimental. Washington, coming off of a national championship loss to Michigan, but they had to replace Coach Kalen DeBoer, who went down to Alabama and then literally saved the recruiting class and brought in an incredible amount of talent, even as Nick Saban left and some Tide were jumping ship. Now we have Jed Frisch, who's fresh off of 3 years at Arizona, and he's taking over the Huskies. But he did take Arizona to a 10-3 record and a number 11 ranking last year, which is the highest in over 2 decades. So those four teams will be trying to figure out the Big Ten. And to the fairness of those four teams, the Big Ten will be trying to figure out those new matchups, which leads me into the second big thing I'll be looking at this year, and that's the new matchups that we can watch. Oregon will play at home versus Ohio State, which could be the game of the year, probably be up there battling Ohio State and Michigan. And of course, Oregon will also be on the road at Michigan and on the road at Wisconsin. Those are three must tune in games. Going to be fantastic to see how the Ducks handle that. UCLA will travel to Penn State. They will get to travel to Iowa, get a chance to see the wave, which is probably the coolest tradition of anything going. When you see them wave at the kids at the Children's Hospital, it is fantastic. And of course, UCLA, it's not a Big Ten game, but they are going to LSU in the non-conference. You talk about a tough game to play. USC, we get to see USC go to Michigan. That will be a great game, something that hasn't happened more than a couple times. Just interesting to watch the USC Trojans visit the Michigan Wolverines. And Wisconsin and Penn State will be coming in to visit the Trojans. That will be a lot of fun too. So again, some big games there. And Washington, they'll be hosting the Wolverines, and they too will be traveling out to Iowa and out to Penn State. So we're going to see some marquee matchups that will jump off the schedule, and I think those will be a ton of fun. The third thing I'm watching here in the Big Ten is Michigan, because there's never a dull day in Ann Arbor, at least since Jim Harbaugh came back. And of course, now he's out in LA in the NFL, but it's still a lot of his organization. And Jim doesn't work quiet, and Jim doesn't work boring. So this year will be no difference. What will the sanctions be from the NCAA? There's an early draft that's circulating out there that makes it sound like new head coach Sharon Moore is one of 7 members of the 2023 Michigan National Championship program accused of violating NCAA rules. Connor Stallions and his effort to capture the play calling signals of opponents may cost the Wolverines more than the price that Jim Harbaugh paid last season. We don't know. You have Ohio State fans who are wanting the death penalty. They want all sorts of things. You have Michigan fans who try to act like knowing what the play is no big deal. I'm assuming the sanctions will be somewhere in between. But in this era that we are in right now, where you have so much turnover every season, whether it's guys going pro, guys going into the transfer portal, so many of these players won't be there. Probably a third of the team wasn't there when these things happened. I don't know how you do that and make it fair on the players. It is a real challenge for the NCAA to try to figure that out. I guess the other thing you could do is take away the national title, but once you win it on the field, can you really take it away? Does anybody really say that Louisville didn't win the 2013 national championship in basketball? Ironically, they beat the Michigan Wolverines that year, and I'm sure Michigan fans didn't lose any tears when Louisville got stripped of the title. Who knows what'll happen with this one? But I will say that the staff has a talented team there, despite the 13 people who were picked in the NFL draft. They can use the us against the world to motivate a very talented Michigan team that, in my opinion, right now is being slightly overlooked as everybody looks to Ohio State and Oregon as the leaders of the Big Ten, followed by Penn State. and you're not hearing anything at all about the defending national champions. I think Coach Moore can get some motivational hay out of that. And can Coach Moore maintain that chip on the shoulder mentality that's allowed Michigan to effectively win battles on the offensive and defensive line when they metaphorically punch people in the face in the first play of the game and say, this is going to happen to you all game. You can't stop us. I don't know that I would be willing to overlook Michigan as being a contender for the CFP, but that's why they play the games. The fourth thing I'm going to be looking at in the Big Ten is Ohio State and Ryan Day. Ryan Day is under tremendous pressure to beat Michigan. His Ohio State teams have lost 3 in a row to the Wolverines. All 3 times, Ohio State was the number 2 team in the country, and they've lost 2 of the last 3 in Ann Arbor. Now, the last coach for Ohio State to lose to Michigan 3 straight times was John Cooper. He did that in 95, 96, and 97. Ironically, Coach Cooper is also the last Ohio State coach who lost 4 times in a row to Michigan. He did that in 88, 89, 90, and 91. Cooper finished his career a paltry 2-10-1 against Michigan. Here's what's eerie. In 93, 95, and 96, Ohio State entered the game undefeated only to lose to Michigan. That sounds a little familiar, a little too familiar. The moral to the story is no Ohio State coach wants to be compared to John Cooper when it comes to talking about Michigan and Ohio State games. Ryan Day needs to beat Michigan. And Ohio State fans expect this team to make it to the CFP. And to be honest, the ones I talk to expect to make it all the way to the CFP title game. If the Big Ten was the old Big Ten, that would be one thing. You would say Michigan could be down this year. We got to beat Penn State. But with Oregon coming into the league, Michigan having this potential chip on the shoulder, you've got Penn State who's playing well. USC is coming into the league. Iowa has a very favorable schedule this year. It is really hard to know what's going to happen, and it's certainly not automatic for the Buckeyes. But Ryan Day needs to beat Michigan. Number 5, will James Franklin take the Nittany Lions to the CFP? College football playoff has been something that the Nittany Lions have never played in while it's at the 4-team level. Even though they won the Big Ten in 2016, they still didn't make it into the CFP. But here's the interesting thing. If the 12-team tournament existed in that time frame, Penn State's CFP rankings would have seen them in the tournament 6 times, including both of the last 2 seasons. Franklin's done an admirable job at Penn State. But no matter what he has done, they still are looking up at Ohio State and Michigan. What if the Nittany Lions miss the CFP in this new 12-team format? Well, they have a chance to make it. And once you're in, talent and timely luck can make any of the teams in the tournament a title winner. But if Penn State doesn't make it, will Penn State boosters decide this is time to get a new coach? That's the magic question. The new Big Ten makes it both easier and harder to make it to the CFP. Without divisions, the Nittany Lions won't have to look up at the Buckeyes and Wolverines all year long. And this year in the schedule, they don't even play Michigan. But they still have to play the Buckeyes. And now they have to play USC and Washington, along with other Big Ten powers such as Wisconsin. So nothing's going to come easy for Coach Franklin, but he has the ability to jump into the CFP. If he doesn't, will the boosters be restless? That's what I'm going to be watching.